Hello and welcome. My name is Ben and today we're going to take a quick look at Unity's UI Canvas. Now, the UI Canvas is arguably one of the most important components when designing and developing a UI for your application or game. Getting it right at the beginning could save you a lot of heartache and also some optimization going forward. So today we will take a look at the three different ways that you can set up a UI Canvas, the UI Canvas scalar component, and a wee trick on UI optimization. Okay, so let's jump into Unity and take a look at the UI canvas. Now, the easiest way to look at the different canvas options is actually to download Unity's own UI samples from the asset store. Once you've downloaded this and added to your account, you can go into the package manager inside Unity and import it to your new project from there. And once you're in there, I suggest going to the menu 3D scene, in which we can see there is a menu that is set up in 3D space. So let's take a quick look at how this is set up and the different options available to you. Now, if you have the canvas selected up here in the hierarchy, you can go across to the inspector and see the canvas component attached here. Now, what we're interested in looking at first of all is the render mode. The render mode has three options. There's screen space overlay, screen space camera, and world space. Currently this is set to screen space overlay, which means that it will appear above absolutely everything flat on screen. If we flip over to the game mode, that's exactly what you see there. We can see the background object, and we can see the menu system here on the right hand side. Now if I push play, we can see the menu here coming in from the side animating, and we can see that it has some animations as we mouse over buttons too. But it looks a bit strange on the screen space because of the way this has been set up. The animations are trying to animate in 3D space, which isn't really translated very well when we're looking at it on a flat plane. Screen space overlay is the most useful render mode for when we are dealing with mobile applications or flat on-screen UI such as HUDs or main menus that don't have these fancy 3D animations. For these animations, we probably want to look at screen space camera, which actually will take into account the rotation of your object in space. As we go back into the scene view, we can see that the canvas is actually moved in the scene view there. But we can see that this menu has a rotation on it. If we go down to this window object here, you can see there's a 30-degree rotation on the y-axis, which gives it this offset look when we're in the scene, in the game view. Now if we push play again, we'll see those animations that were there before, but they'll look a bit more natural now as it follows the cursor and it slightly tweaks the rotation of that window as we're moving across it. So screen space camera, in the same sense as screen space overlay, will always render on top of everything, but it will be based on an actual camera itself, so you can throw in those rotations, and you can also throw in some camera post-processing or other effects onto it. The final option that we have is world space. Now, world space is the most common one that you're going to use when developing for virtual reality, or if you're developing UI that's above characters as they're running around in the game, or in, as it says, in world space, objects in front of buildings or whatever. Now let's look at a trick on how to set up the world canvas to be the right size for our game objects. Say as an example we want to have a little name box above a player's head made out of UI. What we'll do is we will just quickly create a 3D capsule to represent our player. This capsule is usually set up already to be the right kind of size for a player object. And we'll go to it in the scene and we'll see it's quite small compared to the rest of the UI that was already set up. What we're going to do now is we're going to add another UI canvas. So right click UI and then go to canvas. And this canvas is automatically set to screen space overlay. And you can see that it's, again, huge compared to what our player object is going to be. Let's switch it into world space. Doesn't change the size of it. What we're also going to do is we're going to change the position of it to be 0, 0 on the player. But we change the pivot also to 0, and we'll put this position back up to 1. Now what we'll find is that canvas is sitting perfectly on top of the player's head in the scene, but it's still huge. So what do? Well, we're going to set our reference width and height for our canvas. So we're just going to use some round numbers just to make it easier. So we'll set it to 800 by 600. Now we want the canvas width of 800 pixels to match the width of the player. And that's easy enough to do by adjusting the scale as 1 divided by the width of the canvas, 800. Now we've got to keep it uniform in all 3 axes for it to look correct with our UI system. So we set it to all 3, and then we can see we have a canvas that is 800 by 600 pixels, but also the exact width of our player. And from there we can start developing our in-world UI. Now the next thing that's crucial to talk about when working with canvases is that reference resolution that we've just talked about there for the world space UI. If we go back to the root of this demo and get our canvas set back into screen space camera, we can see that when the game is set in the 16 by 9 aspect, it looks pretty good, sits very nicely on the screen. But if we use the game view and change that aspect to something crazy like an ultra high definition screen, we can see that the UI is now horribly stretched out on the screen and doesn't look very good. This can be easily fixed by adjusting the values in the canvas scaler. So in the sample it's already set to be scale with screen size. I just flipped it back there to show the example. But if we switch it back to scale with screen size, we can see that we get this reference resolution in here, which is that 800 by 600. And then there's a screen match mode for either the width or the height of the screen. You can play around with this value. It can be all the way to the height, it can be all the way to the width, and you can see that it adjusts the UI ever slightly depending on how it's set up. It really depends on your target devices on what's going to be crucial here. If you're going for a landscape thing, it's maybe better to set it with the height, because that might be the one thing that changes if you're having different phones, different monitor screens. Something in the middle might work for you, or if it's a portrait mode, then maybe controlling via width might be better as well. So if we see now, if we flip it over to that ultra high definition screen now, you can see that it stays pretty much exactly the same size because the aspect ratio is pretty much the same there. We can flip through all the different aspect ratios here. We can even put it onto the free aspect, which fills up the entire screen, and then play about with this to see how it's affected as the screen stretches. Now the final thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the UI canvas is its performance. When we draw UI to a canvas, it will retain its state across frames, and it won't redraw unless it has to. Obviously once we start interacting it, and we get hover states and different colors changing, then the canvas system in the background is going to redraw everything that's on it. But that's the key point, it's going to redraw absolutely everything on that canvas. So if you have a very complex UI and you hover over a single button, it's going to redraw that entire UI every frame that you have that different interaction. So it can be advisable to split up UI heavy systems into multiple canvases, so that if you're interacting with a button, then it's only redrawing perhaps that panel, and not maybe if you've got UI panels all over the screen, it's not redrawing every single one of them, but just the one that you're interacting with at the time, to save you some processing time. So thanks very much for tuning in. This was a quick guide on the UI canvas system. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about the system here that you can take and apply to your own projects. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next time. Bye.